Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host, Jorge Martin. Familia. It's the off season. Super Bowl is past, but there's no rest. But I did do a little rest last week. Had a trip, a couple trips that had to get taken care of. One family, one business. So, but we're here. It's the off season, and you know what? It also means draft season. The combine's coming up, and I had to just bring on one of my buen amigos so to really talk about it. But first, also, I want to make sure you're going to Familia FFB on YouTube. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, por favor. Get us in there. But you know what? When it comes to the NFL draft, Familia, it's that there's one of, I mean, luckily, not only do I consider this person one of the smartest people I know when it comes to the draft, and one of the truly just one of the people who really follows the the college football season and gives us great content. I also consider him a compadre, muy buen amigo. So you know what, you guys know him at For Whom J Bell Tolls. I know he's really cool because in one of my most competitive leagues, in fact, probably my most competitive league, non-industry league, I get like 2-3 times a season, I get tweets into our chat that are his tweets, where people are like, talking about how smart he is. So I know it's good. I actually have to tell the people, yeah, he's a friend of mine. So he's my buen amigo. But hey, you guys have seen him on the Devi Royale. He and Christian Williams and Kevin Coleman have really built something great at Football Guys. They do the Dynasty show. He also does DFS content for him. Hey, you know what? Let's bring him in. Mi amigo, el jefe, as I love to call him, Jeff Bell. Mi amigo, welcome home.
Jorge, thank you so much for the invitation and the kind words, and you're far too kind. I'm definitely not very cool at all. No, but that's very cool. A very nice intro, and I really appreciate this time that we were able to get here. Prospect season is a special time of year. It only comes around once a year, and so be able to dive in and talk about some of these incoming rookies, and hopefully be able to set you up for your rookie drafts, but also to get you ready for redraft season, and to be able to kind of look forward on where the value is going to lie and who are you going to be able to grab to help those redraft teams.
And that's so true because we've seen so, and we're going to be talking about wide receivers today. We've seen so many wide receivers over the last 4 or 5 years who've had either breakouts from the a few that have breakouts from the beginning, obviously Puka Nacua last year, but some that have gradual breakouts during the season. And that to me is what's really special. That to me is what getting people to think about this. It makes it really special. And also the thing I love about it, we're getting this before, where you're such a tape grinder, and you grind the college football season as well as the NFL season. And I think the great thing is it's you're basing everything off of what we've seen and not, what's his 40 time or what was his 3-cone drill and stuff like that, which those are great. But I mean, isn't it true? You got to go off the tape, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for the rookie guide, the Football Guys rookie guide is out. You can get a free copy of that. Yes. Just head over to footballguys.com. You can do /rookie guide, or it's going to be right on that main screen. All you need to do is drop your email in and join the subscriber list, and you're going to get a free copy of that rookie guide. We hit 152 rookies in our first edition this year. And so I covered the wide receivers. I did 65 wide receivers. And so that means I had eyes on 65 different wide receivers. I watched every bit of tape that I could potentially find on, for a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., it wasn't too difficult. But then when you start to dig down, a guy like Jacob Coker or Ryan Flournoy or some of these other guys, it can start to be really complicated to really find good film on them. And so digging into those and being able to get eyes on, and that's really was my basis of for every single scouting report I wrote. I watched every single player, ranked 1 through 65, and that was before the combine list was released. And so I was kind of a little bit proud of myself in my process, because I didn't know who was going to be invited to the combine, how many players. So there was 38 wide receivers invited to the combine. 2 of those players, Anthony Gold and Leatrick Griffin, are really kind of just there as kick returners. So if you kind of pare that down to 36, out of my organic rankings, 34 of the 36 invited to combine were in my top 36. And so I was a little bit proud of that. But no, that's kind of was the whole process, to be able to watch through, to be able to look for traits, really look at projecting to what a player can do in the NFL. And that's really what I'm big on, is what can we project this player is able to do in the NFL.
And to me, that is what is truly special about this, being able to sit down like this, because we're getting that insight, breaking those guys down. And Familia, definitely check out that prospect guide. I downloaded it. I've got it downloaded on 2 computers, and so I can keep referring back to it. But yes, you're right. You're first to market, but also not just, you didn't, there was no rushing in there. That's really great analysis, and it's bite sized, so you can read it in chunks. And so that's what I've been doing it. So really enjoy the work. With the combine coming up next week, who are you looking forward to kind of putting on a show out there?
Roman Wilson is going to be the big one. And Roman Wilson had a great Senior Bowl, but I think he's going to have a fantastic combine. There's a couple players. Jacob Coker, I already mentioned him from Holy Cross. I really want to see what he does. Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint from Georgia. I think he can be a potential combine guy. So there's a handful of these deeper names that I'm really looking forward to be able to raise their stock up a little bit. I don't know how much testing the top guys will do, but I really want to see a Troy Franklin from Oregon. I want to see how fast he runs, because I think that he can run sub 4.4. And so that's a 6'3", 6'4" type guy that can go out there and run a sub 4.4. That'll be really interesting. And then Xavier Worthy from Texas is another one that I think can absolutely blaze. But I think overall testing, Roman Wilson, I think, is going to be the guy that's primed to really stand out.
It's not easy for you to say, because that's a Michigan man. So
tell you what,
yeah.
Gotta tip your cap, I mean, they lose 3 in a row and they beat Ohio State 3 in a row. You got to tip your cap to the program that they build. And now, fortunately, Jim Harbaugh is on to bigger and better things. And so hopefully Ohio State's able to get back in there a little bit.
Well, hopefully bring some of that magic to the Chargers, because Justin Herbert, I'd hate to see him be the football version of Mike Trout and never make it to the playoffs. So, or never get to win a playoff game. So, I definitely want to see his talent maximized. So, before we get into these kids, these rookies coming in, the NFL season, the fantasy season, obviously the playoffs and the Super Bowl are in the very recent rearview mirror. But, with, kind of like having some time to kind of like marinate and kind of like think about what's, what this completed season, is there kind of like a strategy, or maybe kind of like a fun experiment that you're looking to kind of like go into the lab and study during the off season to kind of see if maybe something different, or maybe just to reinforce something it could click for you in 2024?
So if you go to my latest article on FootballGuys.com, it is basically, it's titled The Perfect Draft. And so essentially what I did in that article is, we lose you, buddy?
I'm here. My light went out. So
well, I was going to say that the Perfect Draft article, essentially I went back and kind of I reverse engineered what a championship winning roster would be in 2023, depending on where ADP. And so I kind of looked through ADP and divided up into 12 different sections, kind of built a team from scratch, and to see what lessons you can learn on and apply towards next year, on like what team would have won the championship. And so really the big lessons walking away from that, we know, if you follow the fantasy football industry, but it's really big on, this is a wide receiver episode, but grabbing those wide receivers early was something that really shook out as being very important there. The breakout from a guy like Kyron Williams and some of these other guys, Raheem Mostert, the value that you were able to grab on a running back. But this team really reinforced that, because it's looking for highest scores in week 17, 16, and walking it back. So that was big. And then a couple of the other ones, just look for that ambiguity when it comes to backfields. When you look for those running backs, like I mentioned, Raheem Mostert and even Kyron Williams, a lot of us were convinced that it was going to be the Cam Akers show. But if you looked back at the usage for the Rams the previous year, Kyron Williams was starting to step in there in some of the passing downs towards the end of the season. It just was a very poor passing offense, so he wasn't really featured there. So kind of look for some of that ambiguity when it comes to the running backs. The tight ends, it just has really gotten flattened. And so it's kind of one of those that Jason Kelce has come back to the pack, but then you've also had more entrants and more tight ends stepping in there. A guy like Sam Laporta and David Njoku had a great year last year. Some of these other tight ends, makes that a lot deeper. And so if you're not going to have any differentiation between one, Jason Kelce or Travis Kelce at the very, very top, but two, if you don't have those guys like Mark Andrews that are separating themselves from the pack, even as those tight end 2 and 3 and 4, then it really devalues the position in general. And it's really just kind of becomes plug in a Jake Ferguson, whoever you're able to get at tight end 10, 12, or whatever in your league, and kind of just move on and don't even worry too much about it there. So that's an interesting thing, probably a real fade on tight end, I think, is what the way that I'll approach, especially redraft next year. And then kind of quarterback had a little bit of it too, where some of these later quarterbacks really produced between Jordan Love. Dak Prescott had a really strong season. And so, and you had Patrick Mahomes come back to the pack, and even Josh Allen as quarterback 1 was a little bit down from the previous year. And so some of the struggles with Jalen Hurts, you saw some flattening there. And so what it really taking away from that article was hammer those wide receivers early, take lots of shots at running backs, and grab upside quarterbacks, and then tight end, you kind of just fill in.
I think you're right. I'm. It's funny. A lot of the lessons I may be doing. One of the things I'm going to wait till the schedule comes out, but I may be doing some platoon quarterbacks. Just kind of and just try and hammer running back and wide receiver early. I mean, but definitely hitting heavy on wide receiver, always making sure that there's having a wide receiver in the flex position, because I think that's where the greatest value is coming from. And there's so few running backs that are going to be worth, putting in a as a third running back on a roster. So I love what you were saying. Yeah. And the tight ends, it's how many guys come back to earth a little bit. But I'm pretty, I think I'm really excited about what you were saying about the receivers, and I think this year didn't it show you got to get quarterback. I mean, you got to get running back right. You in some way, shape, or form. Even if you don't get a McCaffrey, you got to figure out some of those guys and take your shots as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. And yeah, I mean, if you grabbed Kyren Williams, you got pretty lucky, and there were some other deep ones you could grab as well.
I think Kyren Williams, I know Christian McCaffrey was on more championship teams, but Kyren Williams was right behind him. And Kyren Williams was a stud all 3 of those championship weeks. And Christian McCaffrey was okay in week 17, championship. So
he was on those teams that was playing in the championship, but how many have actually he delivered? Because he had that great matchup against the Commanders, but then he really had a subpar showing for what he normally did. And so if you really built your team around him, and so like that perfect draft, I didn't even have Christian McCaffrey on my team. I ended up with CeeDee Lamb as my number 1 pick on that team, because ending up as the wide receiver 1, he was within the top 12 of ADP, and he had the biggest week in week 17. And so that's kind of the way that it shook out.
And you know what? And it's one of those things you could have maybe paired him with Lamar Jackson, several rounds later, and he exploded in week 17. So no, there is luck factor, but yeah, you're definitely making your own luck when it comes to that. So that's cool. So there is one question I want to get into, since we're going to be talking about rookie wide receivers, and you talked about the rookie breakouts a little bit, but I know we can't expect a Puka Nacua type of season to break out anytime. I mean, people liked him last year, but nobody believed he would go for almost 1,500 yards. But is there something that people that fantasy managers should look at for the rookie breakouts, kind of a lesser extent with some of the other guys?
Opportunity. Opportunity, I think, was the bedrock for Puka Nacua. We knew, especially coming into that, when you saw Cooper Kupp was going to start the season on IR, and you had heard some of the summer rumblings on Puka Nacua, and you look around there, and people wanted to wish cast with Van Jefferson that might actually happen, or it didn't really have an answer for what that wide receiver room would look like with Cooper Kupp starting the season on IR, and especially the questions on even if you flash back to that last August when it was announced he was going to go on IR, there were questions of, is he even going to play this year? And so like seeing that breakout, that opportunity there, and then the opportunity for a guy like Tank Dell or the opportunity for a Rashee Rice relative to really kind of the lack of opportunity for a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba or Quentin Johnson, some of these players that were sitting at the top of the class that got drafted into situations we knew they would be concerning situations. Once you stepped into the redraft arena, people still wanted to take them as the top receivers because they were drafted as the top receivers, and kind of overlooking some of those rookies that landed in the better spots. And I think that that's a mindset that we've long had with running backs, that we're looking for those running back. The opportunity makes a big difference at running back. But I think traditionally, there's been a little bit of that learning curve with the wide receiver position, but I think you're seeing more polished prospects come in at the wide receiver position, ready to contribute earlier. And so later draft picks are able to contribute earlier relative to having that big learning curve and having some of those more complexities in an NFL offense. Some of those schemes have flown down even into high school and even before high school. So these kids have gotten into those opportunities to play in those schemes, but they're comfortable. And a lot of it too is the different spacing in the NFL game, where you're dealing with a lot more the ability to create spacing off routes, the ability to get the ball in space and allow a wide receiver to create on his own. Those types of things have been major changes in the game versus it wasn't that long ago. And especially when we were growing up watching the game, you would need to have these big receivers outside, and it would have these corners and bump and run coverage, and you needed a Drew Bledsoe, and he was going to try to jam it into that 6'4" wide receiver trying to fight through bump and run coverage. You just don't see that anymore.
No, that's awesome. And you know what? And it brings me to a question that I have lower in the show doc, but I want to bring it up to you right now. With this wide receiver class being so loaded, and the running back class, so many people are talking about the running back class is not. I mean, we obviously will find some people based on opportunity, but I'm reminded of something that Lev Bell said a couple years ago, that if he had it to do over again, he would have come up as a receiver. Are we seeing the better athletes that may have gravitated to running back? Are they starting to come up as receivers? Because we're starting to see some wide frame guys that, kind of like AJ Brown, 6'2", 210, 215, something like that. Guys like that. And guys that may have been running back before. Are we seeing those guys kind of gravitate to receiver a little bit more?
So yes, and for a long time, the way high school football functioned for a lot of high school football programs was essentially you wanted to put your best athletes on defense and then have your best athlete at running back, and you wanted to have a stifling defense and have that running back and have that guy go off, and then have a strong defense to prevent the opponent's offense from going off. And so what we've seen, and it's really kind of been over the last 20 years or so, I go back to Joe Tiller's offenses with Purdue and kind of thinking like there, and it's really kind of flowing up. Texas is where a lot of this flows up from. And you go into Texas high school football, almost all of those programs are playing spread offense now. And so what you're seeing, you're not only having the movement of the running back, kids are seeing the way that running backs are paid at the NFL level. So they're wanting to have those multiple skills and be able to develop earlier at wide receiver. You're also seeing, especially in Texas, this is happening where you're going up against a spread offense that the score is going to end up being 56-49, and nobody wants to be that defensive back, that 17-year-old defensive back trying to ask a girl to homecoming after some wide receiver went out and put 250 and 3 touchdowns on him. They want to be the guy doing that. And so, I mean, but it's real. We laugh and it's funny, but it's real because that's really happening. And it's, high school offenses are understanding more comfortable with quarterbacks throwing the ball, having these schemes that can create the space for these wide receivers. And it's even flowing down into 8th grade, 7th grade. I go back when I had talked to Denny Carter a little bit on just kind of teasing back and forth on Twitter, but I coached flag football a couple of years ago for like 5th graders or so. And a lot of the coaches there are worried about running reverses and whatnot. And I let my kids my first practice, I let them go out and play, and I wanted to see how they play. And because I remember being a kid, we'd throw the ball around at recess all day long, but then you get into organized football and the adults would only let you run the ball. Well, I wanted to see these kids play, and I asked them, like, who plays Madden? And everybody's like, well, I play Madden. And to watch them play, they're throwing the ball around, and I was like, hey, let's go. We're going to run a spread offense. We're going to have some RPOs in here. We're going to be throwing the ball. And like, we were about the only team in the league that, like, we were throwing it about every play, because why not? These kids do it at recess.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what? It's kind of like, I mean, it's got to be freeing for them. I mean, because when you're talking about you know, especially in flag football, you want to get you want to get your best athlete. It's like shortstop in baseball. You want to get the best athlete, get the ball in his hands. If nobody's there, take off and run. So it's kind of like Lamar. You know, if you could get some, you know, kind of like a 5th grade Lamar Jackson out there or something like that. So love it, love it, love it. Okay, so I got a Bills question for you. We're going to be getting into the receivers. Is there, you know, and they're picking in the 20s. I forget which number. And I think I just saw a mock draft where where Daniel Jeremiah had them trading up to number 21. Is in the range that they're getting, knowing who's going, who could be going in that range. Who would be your dream to kind of go there and kind of pair with Stephon Diggs and maybe take over as the wide receiver 1 down the line?
Troy Franklin would be my dream, the wide receiver from Oregon. I think that player you have the verticality that he can utilize Josh Allen's arm, like that would be a deep threat that Josh Allen simply has never had. And he's gotten a lot of development, especially this past year in his game, to work a little bit more underneath to kind of be that number 1 wide receiver. And so he kind of is getting mocked around in that range. I don't know. I'm seeing mocks with him out of the first round. And to me, like, you have a kid that, he's a junior. He's an early declare. He was incredibly productive. He broke Oregon school records at wide receiver. He's 6'3", and he's potentially going to run a 4.4 sub. That player is not falling out of the first round. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, there's got to be so many. I mean, I know people want to be building in the trenches and everything like that, but no, if he falls there, oh my goodness, I'm gonna text you immediately and be like, okay, how much are you celebrating right now? So that's gonna be good times. That would be good. Oh, can you just imagine Josh Allen's big arm throwing to him? Oh,
it'd be beautiful.
Oh, we wouldn't. Yeah, that'd be phenomenal. Love it. All right, so I love this next part. So let's get into the receivers, the rookie class, ballyhooed rookie class. And we're going to start in your neck of the woods right there. Marvin Harrison Jr. So coming out of The Ohio State University, you know, the school you love. Gosh, I mean, 6'4", 205. I know we'll get the measurements officially later, but I mean, we're talking about generational talent, but I'm giving you the floor on this one because I know he's the one you've watched as much. What are you so excited about him at the next level?
His ability to work intermediate to deep is where he really stands out, in his ability to create separation in vertical routes and create separation downfield. He's a really easy separator. He's very technical. Wide receiver, and that really stands out. I mean, you watch him play, and my joke is that this is a player that has been around NFL wide receivers his entire life because, well, he has been, because his dad is one. So, and there are so many plays on his highlight reel where you'll see, you watch a lot of football, I watch a lot of football. There are certain things that you see on a field that, okay, well, that quarterback threw that ball away. Like, I've seen that a million times. He threw that ball away, but then, like, wait a minute, like, how he caught it, like, how did he do, like, he got a foot down, like, wait, how did this happen? Like, and it's you know, as you watch players, there's these just few rare players that have that ability in your mind to do things that are just so far outside of what you normally see happen. And so Marvin Harrison Jr. has that ability. He's exceptional body control. And so the ability to work the sidelines, the ability to work vertical, the ability to work in the intermediate game. I think he's maybe still developing a little bit in the quick game. I don't know that he he can create with the ball in his hands, but he's not. I mean, he's definitely not going to be like a Tank Dell or somebody like that, where he's just kind of one of these water bug guys that does that, or even like a Rashee Rice that brings the power behind it. I don't know that he's all the way there, and I don't know that you want to use him in those areas because the value that he can create downfield or in the intermediate game.
And isn't it like, he's so tall and he's such a long strider. Doesn't it seem like how it doesn't look like he's running that fast, but all you do is see him running away from defenders. And that to me is just, there's such an effortlessness to the way he plays. I think it's, okay. I'm not going to ask you this about everybody because I know you comped him to Larry Fitzgerald, but do you have a dream spot that you want him to land? Knowing that he's not going to last very long.
I mean, realistically, probably Arizona is the nicest one. Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably the realistic spot, but to be able to go in there and depending on what happens with Hollywood Brown and free agency, to step in with Kyler Murray at quarterback and to feel good about the quarterback that you have there, having Trey McBride to be able to play off him as well. And so I think that's probably the most realistic, best landing spot relative to whatever else could be on the board. I mean, talk about the Chargers, and they're certainly going to have Justin Herbert there, but I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about the volume, frankly, of the passing game relative to what we've seen Jim Harbaugh as coach. Whereas I think with Kyler Murray, it's going to be there, and that gives you a high-end quarterback to be able to play with. I mean, there's maybe a pie in the sky scenario where the Bears take Caleb Williams and then they are able to maneuver their way back up to grab Marvin Harrison Jr. too, and to be able to pair Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. together would be quite a bit of fun. But really just making sure that he lands with a quarterback that can give him that high upside is what my hope. Like I don't want him in division, but I don't want him in New England just because what's that quarterback situation going to look like if they were to decide to draft him with the third pick and then explore quarterback later in the draft or look at other avenues? I would not love that.
Yeah, you, me, and Matt Harmon, he's like, he does not want to see him in New England. So please, no, just get him with a quarterback. Now, I think you put in the prospect guide. He's the 102 in Superflex, right? In Superflex,
I believe so, and I think some of that. Maybe a little bit of uncertainty around Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels is a player that could potentially push him to move down if we've loved the landing spot that he lands in. But yeah, I think that when you look at the safety at the position, and I think that's one of the big things that, I mean, I personally learned that when you flash back to 2 years ago, I did a couple rookie drafts before the draft, and I was particularly high on Malik Willis, but I felt very good about Garrett Wilson being an NFL player. And so I think especially when you're looking early, just be safe, like early, as safe as you possibly can be early in your rookie drafts. And that's really what Marvin Harrison Jr. delivers. He delivers that safety in an early pick. And so to be able to take him at the 102, to feel good about that, it's one of those, it's a delicate balance between swinging for the upside, swinging for positional value, and super flex at a quarterback position relative to just, I can plug this guy in and I know he's going to be a wide receiver one on my dynasty roster for the next 10, 12, 15 years or whatnot.
And I've got that quandary in a league where I could use some youth at quarterback, but I'm probably going to pull the trigger on Marvin Harrison Jr. So love it. Okay. We're going to the Pacific Northwest on the next one. Rome Odunze. I know you've got Malik Nabers. I played with the order a little bit. We're going to be mostly in the order on this one. I admittedly, I do a lot of I really start my college scouting, kind of like late November, when the conference, the conferences start to have their championship games, the big games happen, the rivalry games happen. Rome Odunze, I got to see him probably more than everybody else, obviously, because he played in the college football championships. I fell in love with him. So I want kind of like your thoughts where you see him kind of at the next level. He's a big guy, 6'3", over 200 pounds. He's great in contested catches, but I'd love your assessment. What makes him special?
He's a deceptive athlete. Like first
Yes.
off, you mentioned the size, 6'3", 215. He's a guy that could be low 4.4s, and he doesn't. I mean, he looks at it in the sense that he's able to win vertically rather easily, but he doesn't really look at when he's moving on the field. You don't exactly pick that up, and you kind of mentioned that with Harrison too. Like some of these guys that are bigger guys that they're just not. Sometimes when you see an Isaiah Pacheco, and like, well, I always joke with Isaiah Pacheco of like, I can't actually tell if he's fast or if he's just moving fast. But no, it's kind of one of those things that you have the opposite end of the spectrum, and guys make it look so easy. He can really work after the catch, and one of the things Washington did well with him was use him where I mentioned that I'm a little bit concerned about Harrison Jr. developing as a shorter player. I think that I have less concerns on Odunze just relative to the way that Washington used him in their offense. A lot of the stuff they used him in was the shorter game, get the ball in his hands, allow him to create or allow him to attack vertically. Little bit concerned in the sense of you played on a very talented team relative to having Jalen McMillan and having Jalen Polk, both going to be NFL wide receivers, having Michael Penix. And so kind of how much of it is him and how much of it is the system. I think most of it's him. And so I think that he does bring that skill set into the NFL level, but there's like that little creeping doubt in the back of your mind relative to maybe some of the other guys were able to produce.
Yeah, I'm really hoping a landing spot. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I hope the Chargers stick at 5 and grab him. Though I do have also thought that they're going to grab an offensive lineman and just kind of, which I always love building through the offensive line, but man, this would be so nice. This would be so nice to see him there. I love his game. I love, and I love his work in the intermediate. In the intermediate part of the field. So that is awesome. Yeah. But also intermediate part of the field, another guy I fell in love with was Malik Nabers. I know you're high on him. One of the things that struck me, and I actually went to Twitter and just kind of watched, and it was just one play on each, and it just so happened that it was because I wanted to see kind of like how he moved compared to Ja'Marr Chase, because they're almost the same size, 6 foot, about 200 pounds. And there was a play that it just started with a pass to the left, and they just kind of like ran through the defense, and it just so happened it was very similar. I know you haven't comped to someone else, but the Malik Nabers. I mean, the LSU offense was so fun, and it was because of Malik Nabers. I'd love to hear what you think.
So Marvin Harrison Jr. is a little bit like smooth jazz. I think music, when you watch him, the way that he moves. Malik Nabers is like, if you're familiar with the Pixies, the way the start, that like the immediate like power and like kind of one of those like get you off balance, the way that Kurt Cobain kind of grew out of that and the early Nirvana type stuff is like, I feel like that's Malik Nabers as a wide receiver, where he just has, it's just like this herky jerky explosion. It's just, it's very fun to watch. And it's kind of, I don't know how strong of a technically receiver is, because he's just able to go from, it feels like standing still to moving 60 miles per hour, like that, just that immediate pop that is very, very rare. And so his ability to create with the ball in his hands, his ability to open up and separate vertically, definitely has that in spades. And so I like him quite a bit in terms of, and I said this, and I do the Thursday night Audible Live with Matt Waldman. He was on it early, but I kind of mentioned it too, that Nabers could easily be a better fantasy wide receiver than Marvin Harrison Jr. when you look at the way the current NFL is structured and the way that they want to get the ball in these guys' hands and allow them to create, to be able to stack that volume, to be able to stack those 13 to 15 targets or whatever it might be within a game. We talk about Puka Nacua early in the show, and that's a player that brings a tremendous amount of physicality to the wide receiver position. Nabers has some of that as well, but on a much higher level explosion. And so he's a very, very fun watch, very, very fun player. He has that great ability. And again, like I go back to it in my mind of like just kind of that early 90s, late 80s, like just that stop start, like rock, alt rock roller music. Like when I watch him play, it feels like.
Oh man, you remind me, another band that remind me of is the Violent Femmes, who did the yep. So yeah, I can totally see that. Can you imagine him like on a team on a dome team. And just, I mean, how fun that would be if he ended up like, I mean, I don't think he'll last to Indianapolis or something like that, but something like that, a team that plays on the fast track. I think it could really be. I mean, actually, it could be the Chargers, so it could be something like that. So he's definitely going to be going off in that range. He's so fun. He's so fun. Well, let's get him into his teammate. Brian Thomas, LSU, a taller guy, another, about the same height as Marvin Harrison Jr. Watching, I got to watch them back to back, and it was, to me, it was amazing. Watching dedicated highlights on one and then dedicated highlights on the other one. Very different receivers, but both just incredibly fun to watch. I mean, how great compliment is he? And at the next level, he is that prototype, 6'4". What are the things that you're looking for him at the next level?
You mentioned your show notes. I had it in the rookie guide, his basketball background. And so like there's, there are players that a lot of these guys are multiple sport athletes, which you love to see, especially at the wide receiver position. They're going to be multiple sport athletes, but he is legitimate, like could have gone to SEC schools, Florida, Texas A&M on a basketball scholarship. And so I think that one of the things that you see with bigger receivers is, I don't know if lumbering is a fair way to say it, but these guys, they don't move the way that these smaller receivers do. Whereas Brian Thomas moves like a wing in a basketball, like he's like that 6'4", 6'5". He moves like that shooting guard or like the small forward that's able to operate on the perimeter and be able to explode at the rim and to be able to juke somebody out of their shoes, like type movement that you don't really know that you see a lot in the bigger body NFL wide receivers. I mean, you're thinking like, look at the Senior Bowl, a guy like Johnny Wilson, and Johnny Wilson is 6'7", so there's a slight size difference, but he's just kind of, I hesitate to say lumbering because I don't want to come off as a bad connotation, but he's just not moving in the same way that Brian Thomas's rare movement. You look back last year to a guy like Quentin Johnston has a little bit more of that stiffer hip movement. He's got the explosion, but he's not, it's just Thomas is much more fluid of an athlete. And so that he brings that to his size and the ability to work vertically downfield, to go up and get balls, to be able to create windows and to be able to really create after the catch, even as along with that, with a very, very tremendous size. And so he's a tough player to peg because I'd love to see what his testing comes out at, because this could be one of those guys that ends up top 15, whereas he's landing later first round in mocks right now. I think there are a couple wide receivers that are landing typically later first round in mocks that have a tremendous opportunity at the combine to be able to push themselves up in relative to the next tier.
No, and you talked about the leaping ability. There were times where it was just not fair when he's going up against like a 5'10" cornerback, and then all of a sudden he's going above the rim and just just grabbing the high, pointing the ball and grabbing it. It's just like, you just knew it's going to be a tough. I love your comp of Roy Williams. So that's a really good one. That's a really good one. Familia, not the Roy Williams who coached at Kansas and North Carolina. No, the football Roy Williams,
or the Cowboy, not the safety that was collar tackling people.
No, not him. Not him. Oh, thank you for the laugh, Miwa. Thank you for the laugh. So, well, you kind of teased this one earlier, talking about the Bills. Troy Franklin, another guy in a fun offense. I mean, the Oregon Washington game was just, just seeing all those those great wide receivers. I'm sure you just had a blast watching that game. What this guy, and you talked about him a little bit, but kind of, what are you looking for? What else are you looking forward to with
him? Just the I did mention the explosion and the high level athleticism. I think that one of the things that when I watch Troy Franklin play at the college level, there are certain players that you can tell that defensive back is absolutely terrified to go up against, like just watching and it just stands out. It is so stark that you can just tell that these corners are terrified to go up against Troy Franklin, because he can just beat you. He's so fast, and he's great feet. And so that's the big thing on him. And he's very young. He's still developing. And so he's able to good, strong route runner. And I think that, I see a lot mentioning about his strength, but then like I watched the tape and I'm thinking to myself, well, I'd like to see him make some contested plays or anything like that. And then you stop and you realize, but the defender's 8 yards away from him. Like, what am I doing? Like, that's not normal movement. Like, the defender is not normally trailing a guy 12 yards behind every single time, or giving a guy 10-yard cushion because he's terrified of that happening. And so it's like, as much as I see out there talking about his lack of strength, it's just that, and one of the things that we talked about at the very start of the show, the way that the game has changed, like, yeah, sure. If an NFL cornerback gets their hands on him, sure, maybe it could be trouble for him. But at the same time, if that NFL quarterback tries to get his hands on him and misses, it is 6 points, and you're putting it up, and you forget about it. And so, because of that, you're going to see a tremendous amount of respect paid to him, I think, when it comes to even the NFL level, and the ability to allow to use him in the short and intermediate games to get the ball in his hands, to create in that sense. Because as soon as that defender comes up and tries to test him, he gives a little juke and he is out the back door, and it's going to be 6 points. And so it's really going to be interesting to see, because again, like the big knocks I have on him, I think he plays his way out of it, and then athleticism plays his way out of it. Speed, just pure raw speed, plays his way out of it, and also having that size too.
Absolutely. And you know what? You had me when you talked about, wanting to see him in an Eric Coryell's type of scheme. So that was just to see him in a bombs away kind of offense like that. That would just, I know that a lot of times defenses are trying to, kind of like curtail the deep ball. But if they could really, get on a team that really utilizes that, like with a big arm guy like Josh Allen, sign me up. I'm drafting him as one of my wide receivers that I want to get. So love to see it. All right. So you talked about this guy a little bit a second ago, Xavier Worthy, coming out of Texas. I think you mentioned that you thought that he might be the fastest guy running it, or if not, or one of the fastest guys running at the combine. He was one of my favorite guys to watch after the big three, because it just looked, it just looked like special speed. And again, effortless, long stride speed. You talked a little bit about how Devonta Smith has kind of like changed the paradigm a little bit, where the lanky, the skinny wide receivers, los flacos, not Joe Flacco, the Flacco in Spanish. How is this kind of like the perfect time for him to be coming into the NFL and not be overlooked because of BMI?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And yeah, you mentioned it. He's another player. The athleticism stands out. The deep speed stands out. He was able to win vertically immediately as a freshman. I think it's kind of, we occasionally run into these players that are so good as freshmen that where we want to see them go, and if they don't get to the point where we want to see them go, they get knocked, when it's maybe not fair, because maybe they are really just good, and like, it's kind of one of those things of, you think you have linear progression in your mind, and sometimes progression is not linear, and sometimes they come in very good and they're able to carry that through. And so I think that I would say I'm seeing more nitpicks on Xavier Worthy maybe than about any other player, because maybe the numbers didn't look good in his deep ball, but when you watch the University of Texas play, like, how many times was Quinn Ewers missing a guy vertically, and that quite often, and he looked pretty good early on as a freshman, making a couple plays downfield. And so I think that ability is certainly there. That speed that you talk about, he's fits very well in the modern NFL. And I think he easily projects there. As you watch him, he's in the guy that you can easily imagine him playing on Sundays in the games that we're seeing now with these lighter wide receivers, and especially the guys that can beat you with speed.
And I can see why, when watching someone like this, how gassed up you are about this draft class, because it's just like I could see so many of these guys going in the first round and just being contributors. It's if not immediately, but at some point during the season. And I think Worthy is definitely one of them because of the size. I mean, Devonta Smith was very good as a rookie, and I think this could be. I want to see him in. God, I want to see him in a good system. I'm trying to remember who you had him favorite spots going to. Well, yeah, the Carolina Panthers could definitely use him. Oh man, can you imagine? And you also mentioned the Atlanta Falcons with Zach Robinson doing what he's going to do with the team. So I think that'd be a lot of fun. Oh, that'd be so much fun.
So I have a mock that I'm working on right now that I'm going to be releasing next week. I have him going to the Kansas City Chiefs. So there you go.
Why do you do that to yourself? Why do you do that to yourself? Come on, man.
Done for punishment. I don't
know. Self-torture. Hey, you know what? At some point, Josh Allen is too good not to get get you into a Super Bowl. I know Patrick Mahomes is up to this point indefatigable unless it's Joe Burrow in a great game, or John Brady, but no, Josh Allen's going to get there. So yeah. Well, so I want to ask you about this next guy who I got to watch him pretty closely in the game against Washington in the college football playoff. I really loved the way Adonai Mitchell moved. Again, another big guy. It looked like he had great feet. I know there's some things to be ironed out. That what could be his potential when he gets to the next step?
This was a player that on first pass, a lot of what you see is really just kind of used strictly as a vertical player, but then once you dig in and you see a little bit more out there, he is a very strong route runner for his size, and it's he played on a Georgia team that was just extremely talented for early in his career, and he dealt with multiple injuries too, and so those kind of things held him back, I think, a little bit. But the biggest thing that stands out for me on Adonai Mitchell is that I think he's played in 5 college football playoff games. He caught touchdowns in all 5 of those games. And I think that there are players, and I've talked with him about him before, where if they continue to show up in big games at big moments and making big plays, those are kind of the guys that I circle a couple times and saying, there's something going on here. There's something a little bit next level going on here, because it doesn't, to do that over and over again doesn't randomly happen. And one, it says to what the team really truly believes in him, but 2, it says that his ability to deliver in those situations, and he is a player that has done that. And so again, a player that I think can win downfield, but a developing player that can really turn in the short and intermediate games. And I think, like I said, I think there's a little bit more there than he's been able to show, just relative to the team structure that he's been in and kind of some of the situations that he's been in. But immediately stepping into Texas, and really for all the buzz on Worthy and for Worthy being there and understanding the system, when Texas came into gotta have it moments this year, Adonai Mitchell was the guy that they were going to in those gotta have it moments. And I think that says something quite a bit.
Yeah, because I think he scored the touchdown that got them close against Washington in the.
He did, and then at the end of the game, he was the guy that they threw a couple passes to in the end zone. He wasn't able to bring him down, but yeah, he was the guy that they were going to try to close that game out.
No, that's such a great call. Yes, another guy. Yeah, I'm going to be very intrigued to see what he does at the next level, because hopefully he gets into a situation where he gets a lot of opportunity. Could you see him, late first round, early second round, or could he be solidly?
So I've got him at 38 to Tennessee in my mock.
Would that be
Tennessee kind of investing in offensive line in the first round and then turning around and pairing him with Will Levis's big arm is kind of where I'm landing there. And we know Tennessee loves those big wide receivers.
Oh, that yeah, with that big arm, just offensive line, give him time. So Bill Callahan, work on that offensive line. So get there. So next one, Senior Bowl dandy, Lad McConkey. Now I want to challenge you. I know you gave Julian Edelman as a comp for him. So I want to I don't want to like go, because he's a white guy, to give him a white guy comp. So Ray Garvin at one point mentioned the possibility of him maybe growing into an Amon-Ra St. Brown. Can you see something like that? Because he's got something to him that could really translate.
I think I've seen about 8 players compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown this rookie cycle already. It's not. Yes, the skin color between Lad McConkey and Julian Edelman are both the same, but really, kind of what comes down to
it is similar.
Me on that Lad McConkey comparison to Julian Edelman. McConkey was a high school quarterback, and he was a high school quarterback. He was a high school running back too, and so he was kind of one of those guys that he was at a very, very small school, and just they were like, let's give the ball to Lad and let's let him make something happen. And so Julian Edelman being a quarterback when he was at Kent State in the MAC, that's kind of like that natural kind of that progression from a player that has played quarterback, understands it from that sense, and then translates that into wide receiver. And it's really, Lad McConkey is just an awesome story. So he grew up kind of right in between University of Tennessee and University of Georgia, like almost dead middle. And he just loved Tennessee, desperately wanted to go to Tennessee. He was going to go, he did not get offers from anybody. And he was going to go to, I believe it was Tennessee State. I might be wrong on that, but it was a smaller school in Tennessee. And then Todd Monken just happened upon him, and he basically told Kirby Smart that, hey, this guy is a slot in my offense, and we've got an extra scholarship. I want to put this guy as a slot in my offense, and I want to see what he can do. And he is just delivered over and above that. And I think that it's traditionally, you don't see slots in first round consideration, because really you're kind of wanting those receivers that can win in multiple formation, can kind of line up outside, inside, whatnot. He has that ability to win downfield. And so that's even, I'd put that over above what Amon-Ra St. Brown was carrying in his ability to win downfield. But he is kind of that traditional slot receiver, but he can handle a lot more volume than what he saw at Georgia, just given the structure. We talked about it with Adonai Mitchell, the structure of that offense that they were stepping into, the amount of depth of talent that they had on that team, but also the way they just love to run the ball, the way they love to spread the ball out, and how many 70-0 games they were playing in because they were steamrolling teams. So no, it's a lot more the journey and the understanding and the background and kind of the profile there than any sort of, if I were going to be lazy, I'd comp him to Cooper Kupp. So.
Oh yeah. I would not have allowed that one, because he's like 4 inches shorter than Cooper Kupp. So that I would not. Okay. The more I think about it, and the more I thought about it, I challenged you, but you know what? It makes sense. They both like to be physical, and and it's just, and they live in the slot. I could see Lad McConkey getting, way over 100 targets.
But Edelman could beat you outside too, and Edelman could beat you downfield too. And that's one of the things that I think you get lost a little bit maybe, but he had that, he carried that athleticism through, but really it's a high level understanding of just offense, football, and just the offense in a whole, and how everything kind of functions together.
And I did love, kind of like the spotlight he got on the at the Senior Bowl. But on top of it, I mean, not that he needed much of it, because Georgia was always playing against good teams, and he was burning, really good defenses. So awesome. And by the way, not related to Phil McConkey, the old New York Giants. So remember that, Familia. So one of the places. But Roman Wilson. You talked about him a little bit earlier, about what he could do at the combine. Interesting that it was not a high pass volume offense with Michigan. The things that you really liked about him.
toughness is where a lot of it is, and he's just a very, very tough player. And he had comments after the Ohio State game, but basically we're tougher than they are, and I think that's bringing that in, and the athleticism is big, and he definitely has that in spades. But this is a player that he really stood out to me a couple of years ago, and before like the major production was really there, and college fantasy was kind of overlooking him. There wasn't those types of things until he had this massive year this past year with touchdown luck. He just has the speed to be able to win vertically, but when you really look at him, and I was surprised the way that he weighed in at 185, because when you look at him, he looks like a running back, like on his build almost. He's just very thickly built, and he is. That's the thing of like I see this as a player that, despite being that player that can be that guy that can win downfield, he's going to block somebody. He's going to knock somebody's helmet off, and kind of. He's not afraid to be that physical player there. And so that's, you bring kind of roll that whole package together, and it creates a really, really just fun football player.
No, I think you're right. I think again, get him into the right system. It could be fun. I mean, yeah, you had KC, Baltimore, and Atlanta as potential as interesting landing spots for him, and that any of those could be fun. I can imagine him playing off of Zay Flowers in Baltimore. That'd just be that would be fun. So the next one. I've seen this guy range all over the place. I think Bucky Brooks had him at number 4. So had him at number 13. Another Keon Coleman, another big long strider. But again, you had him at 13. I mean, it's obviously talking about the strength of his class, because he's very talented, and again, big guys. You love those big guys. Kind of tell me kind of like pros and cons with him.
I think it's interesting. So as you kind of look at, we're trying to straddle the line really when we're doing the rookie guide between what a guy like Bucky Brooks is trying to do, but also deliver actionable fantasy advice. And I think that when you're a Bucky Brooks and you're strictly looking at projecting to the NFL, and especially relative to the potential draft capital a player could get, Keon Coleman is the type of player that usually goes in the first round of the NFL draft. These bigger wide receivers that have a certain level of explosion, but there's not a lot on his game that suggests to me that he's going to be a high volume fantasy asset. That's kind of where my concern on it. I don't know that I see the involvement at multiple positions or levels of the field kind of more. I think he's a little bit more of a limited player potentially, but still the type of player that NFL teams talk themselves into and love quite a bit. These bigger wide receivers that, just a rare athlete for his size. But it's just how much of that translates to fantasy production is my relative concern on Keon Coleman. And I'll probably be wrong, and you probably clip this in a year and Keon Coleman is Puka Nacua, and everybody's saying, well, that Jeff Bell does not know what he's talking about. But no, that's just kind of what I took away from it.
You know what? I mean, obviously he has talent, but you know what? Just watching him, I mean, he doesn't move as fast as Xavier Worthy. So and they're similar in height. So I think that's going to be one of the things that I'm very intrigued with this one. I've heard a lot of people talk about they can't wait to see how fast he runs. I've heard multiple people talk about that. So that could be very interesting. Of course, Puka didn't run a very fast either, and we saw what happened there. Okay, so we hit 10 receivers. Anybody we haven't talked about that you're excited that you could get excited about in the right landing spot?
Malik Washington from Virginia. He was inside my top 10. That's a player that I think he can step in and be a high-level slot, but also the ability to work outside, the ability to win downfield, the ability to create after the catch. He's a lot of similarities in my mind to Jaden Reed from Green Bay, from Michigan State. I think that there are some similarities there in terms of toughness, athleticism in terms of production. His 1 year at Virginia led the NCAA in receptions. So I'm really curious to see what he does at the combine and where his ultimate capital and landing spot is. Small school, I want to shout out Jacob Coker, because that's a player that can absolutely light up the combine from Holy Cross. Ryan Flanae, he's an older prospect, but I'm really interested and intrigued in him. Just some of these other, Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint's another combine guy, but I think that's another player that NFL teams are going to value higher than what the coming out of maybe the Devy community is going to have that valuation on. I've seen him compared to Jonathan Mingo in fantasy circles. I don't know that that's fair, but I think he's a better athlete than Mingo potentially. But I think might be a more natural football player than Mingo too. So I'm kind of curious to see where those types of players shake out. There's really, you talk about Coleman. I think really, for me, there's a definitive line after Roman Wilson, and then you kind of step into just a group of about 6 to 8 guys that I think can really catch that D2 capital and be able to position themselves if they land in the right spot.
I love it. Love it. Well, speaking of guys who've landed in the right spot, I want before we get into one non-wide receiver, but year 2 wide receivers. We talked about this a little bit last year, but there were some good breakouts. Obviously, we talked about Puka, Rashee Rice, Zay Flowers. Could there be, and there are a few others. Could there be guys who didn't break out last year and that could be getting that year 2 bump? And obviously, I'm setting up your Ohio State guy to right now for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, is certainly under consideration for that. I think the talent was there. I think you watch the games. He certainly flashed when given opportunity. I think what's going to happen with Tyler Lockett? I mean, right. Certainly long term, Tyler Lockett's not going to be there long term. But even the way his contract sets up, there's a chance that Tyler Lockett could not even be there next year, and so that could really position Jackson Smith-Njigba to take a major step forward. I'm trying to run through and see if there's any guys that I'm missing potentially. Maybe a Marvin Mims. I don't know. He had his moments. Like he can come out. Maybe a guy like a Cedric Tillman with the Browns. He was on the field a little bit, but they were really looking for that supporting wide receiver. And then, I mentioned Quentin Johnston before. I'm not crushing Quentin Johnston the way that many are. I think that I think there were concerns about him being more of a developmental wide receiver that was a little bit limited on his route tree coming into there. And I think that if he has the right attitude and brings the physicality for a Jim Harbaugh offense, I think he could be really the type of guy that Jim Harbaugh really loves at the wide receiver position. You look at in this year's class, Cornelius Johnson being kind of that type of player. You think back to Nico Collins and Donovan Peoples-Jones being at Michigan, those types of players for Jim Harbaugh, those bigger, more explosive wide receivers that are able to block, able to do some of those things. And so certainly you're not going to get any points unless you're in a really inventive John Bosch type league for Quentin Johnston blocking on the field. But I do think that there are things that he can bring to being an NFL wide receiver that I'm not ready to just completely toss him out yet.
Adios mio, John Bosch leagues. Oh my goodness! Just shout out John Bosch, amigo. Yeah, you keep challenging us. Keep challenging us. So I'm not ready to bury Quentin Johnston. I mean, you can't do that with a kid who's 22. But I mean, there are some. I mean, obviously the drops got to fix that. So hopefully, I'm hopeful because I hate to see a first round washout, but on number 2, I really want to see Justin Herbert to get maximized. So I wanted to ask about one non-wide receiver, Brock Bowers. We've heard generational talent. That some have even said he's better than Kyle Pitts, who was the last generational talent in coming out of college. But Brock Bowers definitely put some tape on there. The things that you love to see about him?
The rare tight end that can create after the catch.
Right.
That's where a lot of it is. He had some involvement in the run game. He's just very very explosive with the ball in his hands. And so that's kind of, he got there on tight end size, but he almost falls into a tweener where he's just not this traditional tight end that you think of. Whereas like if you're to do the straight juxtaposition of a Kyle Pitts, where Kyle Pitts was, you're thinking like, well, this guy could be an outside wide receiver, but he's also playing tight end. Bowers is kind of more that H-back type, maybe slot type that can be that little bit more of a deceptive guy that you can get the ball in his hands, give him a screen, those types of plays, and allow him to create in that way. And so I think he's got great speed. He's had multiple long touchdown runs that he was clocked very high. So I think bringing that in really kind of when you look at the way that some of these tight ends are used now, maybe for periods of the time, the way that Dalton Kincaid had a little bit of lower ADOT and kind of used more, get the ball in his hands a little bit more, that type of usage. But I really like the idea of getting him into a team that runs a lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends and has a little bit more of a traditional inline tight end and really kind of uses him as that hybrid slot type movement tight end. I mean, you hate to mention the name, but like Aaron Hernandez, when you're thinking about Aaron Hernandez, the way that he would play kind of as that H-back role, as that player that you could give the ball in the run game, like we never really got to see the high end of what he was potentially capable of doing because of the unfortunate circumstances around him. But just kind of like that type of player in mind is where I am with Brock Bowers, maybe a little bit better athlete at that.
No, I think it's great. No concerns after seeing the picture of him standing next to Gronk and looking like a high school senior compared to Gronk.
I was going to say, other than looking like Adam Harstad from Football Guys, I don't know that I had any real concerns there. I love you, Adam. So shout out there.
Shout out, Adam. Salud, brother. Salud. Oh, I love it. I love it. All right, mi amigo, we're going to close up shop, but I can't close it up without any recent Mexican food discoveries for you.
Jorge, I am the worst person to talk about food. So I have a gluten allergy. And so I'm a pretty plain eater anyways. I do like a good queso, but when it comes to something like Mexican, what I run into, if I can't tell somebody exactly like I have a gluten allergy, and if there's any level of like language barrier, I've run into bad situations before. So I'm not very adventurous, and unfortunately, and I kind of keep it pretty plain Jane when it comes to that. I did take my girls. We went sledding on Sunday. We took them out for tacos after that. And so we went to Condano's Tacos here and had some queso and some tacos there. But definitely I'm on the plain, the queso and chicken type tacos for me.
Hey, you know what? When you know a good thing, and actually, yeah, when there's things that when there's limitations, obviously corn tortillas are gluten free, so that you know, eat those all day. So enjoy, mi amigo, enjoy. All right, anything you want to plug? One more plug for the Familia Football Guys Prospect Guide. Get it. It's going to get updated. Just keep getting it. But anything else you want to pump, because you definitely got some good content coming.
Yeah, I mean, the Football Guys Prospect Guide, check out the Football Guys Dynasty show if you like rookie content, because we are diving in every single week. We are just kind of hitting the rookie class from a different angle. And we did a full NFL mock draft on our last episode. If you're somebody that is more interested in talking about offensive tackles or cornerbacks or whatever it might be, we're trying to really kind of get into the depth of and understanding the class and take it a little bit further and be able to understand, because the way that we can build some of these values on some of these players is to understand where value lies in other positions and where players are going to land within the NFL draft. And so to have that full picture helps you to be able to conceptualize, especially these wide receivers and what we're doing early. One of the big things with these wide receivers is if I can tell you who's going to be in the first round and I can tell you who's going to go day 2, there's a lot of value that early in Dynasty, that if you're able to just nail those 2 types of things. And so kind of looking towards that. I mentioned I had a redraft backward looking that's going to turn into potentially some best ball content here coming up on Football Guys. Just kind of trying to get as much content as I can as time allows it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yes, and I so enjoy that podcast that you guys do, and it's good. Definitely hitting it. This is your season, so this is the best time to be jumping in. I mean, I know we gave you snippets here, but you're gonna get the whole enchilada when you get when you get with the Football Guys Dynasty podcast. So, mi amigo, Muchas gracias. Thank you. Un millón de gracias. Again, find him at For Whom J Bell Tolls on Twitter. Also, again, on wherever you get your podcasts, get the Football Guys podcast, Football Guys Dynasty podcast. So, gosh, this is the Dynasty Captain right here, El Capitan, but I also call him El Jefe. So, familia, muchas gracias for joining us. Also, remember, go to Familia FFB on YouTube. Also, if you want to get this on audio, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, go there. So, otra vez, muchas gracias, Jeff. Muchas gracias, everybody, for joining us. And remember, todos somos familia. Salud.